In a world where war is business and fighter jets are not just weapons, but billion-dollar statements of power, reputation is everything. One Rafale jet, valued at over $100 million, can sway boardroom decisions in Paris, raise eyebrows in Riyadh, and ripple through global stock markets before the smoke clears from a battlefield. On May 6, 2025, the unthinkable happened not on a stock exchange, but in the skies over contested territory between India and Pakistan. A dogfight that lasted just under 5 minutes shattered more than a supersonic aircraft. It cracked the shimmering illusion of Western air superiority and sent defense markets into a tailspin. The Indian Air Force flying its pride, the Dassault Rafale, was in a routine patrol near the line of control. Confidence soared in New Delhi. The Rafale had become a political trophy and a symbol of deterrence against adversaries. But as tensions simmered into confrontation, the skies lit up with more than afterburners. A Chinese-made J-10C fighter of the Pakistan Air Force, sleek and stealthily armed, locked onto the Rafale from beyond visual range. In less than a second, a PL-15 missile streaked toward the French-built jet. The next second changed everything. The Rafale was hit, spectacularly, devastatingly. Footage leaked within minutes, blurred and raw, showing a plume of smoke where once hovered India's frontline jet. The pilot ejected safely, but the damage had been done not just to metal, but to prestige. The world watched, stunned, not just because of the downing, but because of who did it and how. A Pakistani pilot using Chinese engineering had taken out a symbol of French aerospace supremacy. Beijing didn't fire the missile, but it might as well have. The message was loud and global. Chinese military tech had arrived lethal, effective, and cheaper. Within hours, stock tickers in Paris began to blink nervously. Dassault Aviation, maker of the Rafale, watched its shares dip by nearly 6% by the end of the trading day. It was the worst single-day drop for the defense giant in a decade. Analysts hesitated to call it panic, but it was panic. Investors, rattled by headlines like China's PL-15 missile outpaces the West, began to reevaluate risk exposure. Was the Rafale overpriced? Was Western tech still king? Could the once dismissed Chinese alternatives become the new global standard? In contrast, across Shanghai and Shenzhen, there was a quiet, eerie confidence. AVIC, the Chinese state-owned aerospace conglomerate that developed the J-10C, saw a bump in defense sector funds overnight. Indices that tracked military contractors in China turned green amid a sea of red across European bourses. Defense blogs, YouTube experts, and even mainstream financial commentators began calling it the moment the J-10C graduated. More than just a battlefield win, this was a narrative shift. For years, Western defense firms, Dassault, Lockheed Martin, Saab, had dominated not just sales but imagination. They were the trusted brand names. But overnight, the J-10C became a contender, and the PL-15 wasn't just a missile, it was a market disruptor. Buyers noticed. In the Middle East, murmurs spread inside defense procurement circles. Countries like Egypt, Nigeria, and even UAE, which had previously leaned toward Rafale or F-16 deals, began quietly asking about performance data for the J-10C. Saudi defense officials requested classified briefings. Not for buying immediately, but to understand. Because perception drives policy, and policy drives purchases. The immediate aftermath saw Dassault Aviation's shares plummet on the Paris Stock Exchange, dropping by €5.40 to €324, a 1.64% decrease. Analysts warned of further declines as questions arose regarding Rafale's battlefield performance. Conversely, shares of Chengdu Aircraft Corporation, the manufacturer of the J-10C, surged by 18.18%, reflecting growing global recognition of Chinese-made fighter jets. This wasn't just one jet going down. This was a ripple effect. Military contracts, after all, are tied to confidence as much as capability, and confidence, once shaken, is a hard thing to recover. As Rafale stock continued its descent, French officials scrambled for damage control. Press briefings emphasized that the loss was not due to any Rafale weakness, but situational disadvantage. They pointed to pilot fatigue, terrain complexity, electronic warfare, anything to preserve the jet's reputation. But markets don't wait for explanations. They move, and they moved hard. Meanwhile, Chinese state media are capitalized with surgical precision. CGTN released crisp animation, and #J10C trended across defense Twitter and videos, showing the PL-15 missile's range exceeding that of most Western equivalents. Articles frame the event not as a skirmish, but as proof of China's rising dominance in high-tech warfare. Hashtags like #PL15X and even Reddit, where aviation forums exploded with debates. At the Farnborough and Zhuhai air shows scheduled later that year, exhibitors prepared for an entirely new dynamic. Dassault's booth, once crowded and confident, faced new scrutiny. AVIC's pavilion was packed. Buyers leaned in, whispered, asked for specs. Even insurance firms reacted. Risk premiums for Rafale deployments in conflict zones subtly increased. That meant operational costs would go up. Meanwhile, Chinese-made fighters long seen as second tier were suddenly being modeled into Western war games as legitimate threats. And in the boardrooms from New York to Tel Aviv, the question changed from, should we consider Chinese platforms, to, can we afford not to? The psychological damage wasn't just to Dassault or to India's defense narrative, it was systemic. Western defense doctrine, heavily reliant on technological superiority, now had to explain a loss to a system built in China. Defense analysts who once scoffed at Chinese hardware as derivative or Soviet-inspired were forced to recalibrate their frameworks. The fact that the PL-15 had outranged the Rafale's Meteor missile in real combat conditions challenged long-standing assumptions about the global balance of air power. In India, the political storm was immediate and furious. Opposition leaders seized the moment to question the multi-billion-dollar Rafale deal, citing transparency concerns and now performance failures. News anchors replayed the crash footage on endless loops, hammering home the irony of a premier aircraft going down to a cheaper, supposedly inferior adversary. Pro-Rafale voices tried to argue that no aircraft is invincible, that combat involves dozens of variables. But perception was already locked. The Rafale, once a symbol of India's air supremacy, had become the centerpiece of a national embarrassment. And in Pakistan, jubilation was subtle but deliberate. Officials maintained plausible deniability, refusing to release too many details, while quietly allowing the victory to circulate in defense circles. The real celebration wasn't just the downing itself. It was the global reaction. For years, Pakistan had struggled to maintain parity with India's ever-modernizing air force. Now, with one precision strike, it evened the scales, and done so using an export aircraft from China. Beijing, of course, said nothing directly, but the message was already loud in global ears. China's arms sales team received an unspoken gift. Within weeks, representatives from Southeast Asian countries quietly requested new briefings. Nations like Bangladesh, Indonesia, and Myanmar, traditionally cautious about Chinese hardware, showed renewed interest. The price-to-performance ratio of the J10C, long seen as too good to be true, suddenly made sense. In Africa, Nigeria, already experimenting with Chinese jets, passed up its evaluation process. The JF-17, co-developed by China and Pakistan, received a halo boost. Buyers assumed if the J10C was this good, the entire family of Chinese jets might deserve a second look. In Europe, there was panic. Not in the streets, but in war rooms and export councils. The Rafale wasn't just a jet. It was France's biggest defense export success in decades. Dassault had staked its future on deals with India, Egypt, Greece, and the UAE. Those deals now had shadows over them. Defense procurement is driven as much by reliability and deterrent credibility as it is by engineering. The downing of a Rafale by a Chinese fighter challenged both. France's response was aggressive. Dassault initiated a rapid PR campaign. Carefully curated technical papers were released, showcasing past combat records, survivability stats, and testimonials from satisfied air forces. Interviews with veteran pilots emphasized that the Rafale's suite of electronic warfare tools was still among the best in the world. But the buzz wasn't enough. Investors remained uneasy. Dassault's next quarterly report forecasted lower delivery expectations and noted a temporary dip in confidence from prospective clients. The stock wobbled again. China, meanwhile, didn't need to campaign. It just needed to be observed. Every analyst from RAND to SIPRI to Jane's Defense began writing about Chinese military innovation with newfound seriousness. The PL-15 missile in particular received focused attention. Western reports had previously acknowledged its range, but doubted its target discrimination accuracy. Now those doubts seemed misplaced. The missile had proven itself. And so had the radar systems aboard the J-10C. The AESA radar, thought to be behind Western equivalents, demonstrated lock-on capabilities at distances that forced a rethink. Speculations emerged that the Chinese may have upgraded their data fusion systems beyond previous intelligence estimates. Theories ran wild. Has AI-assisted targeting tipped the scales? Has China cracked next-generation missile guidance? This wasn't just a public relations win for China. It was a validation of 2 decades of military-industrial investment. The success of the J-10C in a real combat engagement gave Beijing the leverage to offer combat-tested platforms. That phrase alone, combat-tested, carries enormous weight in procurement circles. Back in Washington, the Pentagon held quiet meetings. While the Rafale was a European jet, the broader implication of a Chinese aircraft downing a Western-class multi-role fighter didn't sit well. U.S. defense contractors took note. Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon all began updating internal projections. If Chinese tech could take down a Rafale,